Welcome back, deep divers. We're diving deep today, folks, really deep.
Into what?
Into the human psyche, that murky, sometimes scary, always fascinating world within. Specifically, fear.
Fear.
Hmm.
The universal language. The one that makes your heart race and palms sweat, no matter who you are or where you're from.
Exactly. And we've got our guidebook, David R. Hawkins' Letting Go.
Mm-hmm.
But this time, we're laser-focused. Chapter 6. The one where Hawkins lays it all out. The pathway of surrender, but through the lens of fear.
So we're not just dipping our toes in the shallow end of, oh, I get a little nervous before a presentation.
Nope. We're going full immersion, free-floating anxiety, panic attacks, those subtle but persistent worries, paranoia, all of it.
Even those moments when you feel a little off but can't pinpoint why, like a low hum of unease.
Yeah, that underlying current of something's not quite right.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. Ignoring fear doesn't work.
Right. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It's going to pop up somewhere else, maybe even with more force.
Exactly. And Hawkins puts it even more succinctly. What one holds in mind tends to manifest.
Which explains why sometimes it feels like the more you worry about something, the more likely it is to happen. It's almost like you're calling it in with all that mental energy.
So we're going to unpack all that and explore what letting go of fear actually means.
Sounds like we've got a full agenda. But hey, fear comes in so many flavors, we need a proper tasting menu.
Well, luckily, Hawkins provides just that. It's like he sat down and made an encyclopedia of anxieties. Seriously, this chapter is packed. And he starts with those big, broad categories. Free-floating anxiety, panic attacks, the kind of thing that can knock you off your feet.
The ones that make you feel like you're losing control. Heart pounding, can't breathe, the whole 9 yards. But it's not always that dramatic, is it? Sometimes it's more like a constant companion.
Right, like those chronic fears that just become part of the background noise of your life. You worry about your health, your finances, your relationships. It never really goes away.
And then there's paranoia, where the world feels like a dangerous place and everyone's out to get you. It's like living in a thriller movie.
Okay, so we've got the big, scary stuff. But what about those milder forms of fear? Hawkins dives into those too. That general feeling of uneasiness, being cautious, blocked, or tense.
Those are the sneaky ones. They can really hold you back without you even realizing it. You feel shy, speechless, or superstitious. It's like a constant voice whispering, "Watch out!"
And sometimes it's even more specific. He talks about feeling threatened, insecure, dreading something, being suspicious, timid, or even trapped.
Guilty too. Don't forget that one. Guilt can be a huge source of fear, especially that stage fright, which can be a real killer even for experienced performers.
Oh, absolutely. And then he gets into specific fears, the kind of anxieties that are tied to particular things or situations. Fear of pain, suffering, even the fear of living itself.
Wait, fear of living? How does that even work?
Well, think about it. It's the fear of fully embracing life, taking risks, putting yourself out there. It's the fear of getting hurt, of experiencing loss. It can be paralyzing.
I see. It's like playing it safe all the time, staying in your comfort zone, even if it means sacrificing your dreams.
Exactly. And Hawkins lists a whole bunch more. Fear of loving, of closeness, rejection, failure.
Fear of God, hell, damnation.
Yep, those two. And then more earthly fears like poverty, ridicule, criticism.
Feeling trapped, inadequate, in danger, disapproved of.
Even the fear of boredom. And don't forget about responsibility.
Oh yeah, that one's a biggie. Making decisions, facing authority, punishment, change.
Loss of security, violence, losing control.
Fear of her own feelings even.
Right. Like, what's that about? But he says it's actually pretty common. And then the more common phobias. Heights, sex, being alone.
And of course, the fear of fear itself. Talk about a vicious cycle.
I know, right? It's like anxiety on steroids. But there's one more fear Hawkins points out that often gets overlooked. The fear of retaliation.
Retaliation.
Yeah. It's that urge to strike back when you feel wronged. It's tied to anger, actually.
So it's not just about being afraid, but also about wanting to lash out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Hawkins says that anger often lies just beneath the surface of fear, and that facing that anger can actually be a step towards letting go of the fear.
So it's not about suppressing the anger, but about acknowledging it, understanding where it's coming from.
Right. And then moving through it to something more empowering, like pride and courage. It's like fear is a stepping stone, not a dead end.
So how do we actually do this? How do we move from fear to courage?
Well, Hawkins uses a really relatable example to illustrate this process, the fear of public speaking.
Oh yeah, I think we've all been there. Sweaty palms, racing heart, that feeling like you might faint.
And Hawkins shares his own personal experience with this fear. He talks about how, as a medical intern, he was absolutely terrified of presenting cases to his superiors.
Like physically terrified. His voice would actually fail him.
And what's so fascinating is how this fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was so convinced he would mess up that he actually did.
Because what one holds in mind tends to manifest. It's like he was setting himself up for failure.
And that experience solidified this belief in his mind. I can't speak in public. It's just not possible.
So he avoided it for years, which, as he realized later, only made the fear stronger.
And the fear evolved, didn't it? It went from I can't to I don't want to because I'll be boring and bad at it.
Yeah.
It's like the ego stepped in to create a more comfortable excuse.
A way to avoid facing the real issue, the underlying vulnerability. But Hawkins had a breakthrough moment. He asked himself, what's the worst that could happen?
And the answer was, I could be boring. And in that moment, by accepting that possibility, the fear started to lose its grip.
So he went ahead and gave the presentation. He read it, not very dynamically, but he did it. And guess what? The feedback wasn't great.
His friends were honest. It was technically sound, but pretty boring.
But here's the key. Hawkins didn't let that crush him. He focused on the fact that he had faced his fear. He had done the thing he thought he couldn't do.
And that act, regardless of the outcome, boosted his self-esteem. The victory was in the doing, not the result.
And from there, his relationship with public speaking started to change. He started using humor, self-deprecatingly admitting that he could be boring.
Which, brilliantly, often made the audience laugh. It created this sense of connection, a shared vulnerability.
It disarmed them and him. And as he kept facing his fear, he got better, more confident, more spontaneous. He even started enjoying it.
And eventually it led him to achieve things he had never thought possible. From being terrified to speak in front of a few colleagues, to appearing on national media. Talk about a transformation.
And that's the point, isn't it? This process of letting go can have a ripple effect on your whole life. You become more capable, more resilient, more free.
But here's the thing, folks. Fear isn't just a personal problem. It's a societal one. Hawkins calls it the ruling emotion.
It's everywhere. We see it in the news, in our entertainment, in our daily interactions.
And we develop all sorts of strategies to cope with it. Compensatory devices, he calls them. We try to control our environment, avoid certain situations, numb ourselves with distractions.
And the media often reinforces our fears, bombarding us with stories of danger and disaster. It's like a constant training ground for anxiety.
And to really illustrate the power of fear, Hawkins shares a case study of one of his patients, Betty. Yeah, Betty had a severe germ phobia. It started small, but it quickly spiraled out of control.
It's amazing how fear can do that, how it can take over and distort your whole perception of reality.
It's like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering more and more snow as it goes.
So what happened to Betty?
Well, her fear of germs became a fear of everything. Food, air, sunlight, even other people. She was terrified of getting sick, of cancer, of everything.
It's like she was living in a constant state of siege.
Exactly. And it affected her behavior in extreme ways. She would only wear white clothes, refused to sit down in the office, couldn't even get a prescription without going through elaborate rituals.
Sounds debilitating.
It was. Eventually, she became afraid to even leave her home. She was trapped by her own fear.
And therapy didn't help?
Nothing seemed to work. She was resistant to traditional approaches, wouldn't even let her family touch her. It was a heartbreaking situation.
So what changed?
Well, the therapist, feeling completely helpless, reached a point of surrender himself. He let go of trying to fix Betty and simply focused on sending her love.
Just love. That's it.
That's it. He would focus on loving thoughts during their phone conversations, projecting a sense of care and positive energy.
And it worked.
Remarkably, yes.
Mm.
After a couple of months, Betty started to improve. She was able to come back to the office. Her anxieties gradually diminished.
Wow. So it wasn't about analyzing her fears or challenging her thoughts, but simply about love.
It seems so. And this points to a really powerful principle. Love heals fear. It's a higher vibration, a more powerful energy.
It's like a light that can dispel the darkness.
And it's not just therapists who can do this. Hawkins talks about the healing power of saints and healers, those whose presence radiates love.
But what about family love? If love is so powerful, why doesn't it always heal our sick loved ones?
Hawkins says it's because our love is often mixed with fear and anxiety. We worry, we fret, we doubt.
It's like those clouds blocking the sunlight. The love is there, but it can't reach its full potential.
And saints and healers, he says, are those who have cleared away those clouds. They radiate pure, unconditional love.
So what's the takeaway here?
That by letting go of our resistance to fear, we free up the energy that was bound up in it, and that energy becomes available as love.
So letting go is not just about getting rid of something negative, it's about accessing something positive.
Exactly. And that love is our true nature. It's within us all, even if it's been buried under layers of fear and negative beliefs.
And even if we didn't get a lot of love early in life, we can still cultivate it, rediscover it within ourselves.
And this brings us to another fascinating concept: the shadow.
The shadow. Sounds ominous.
It's not about anything spooky. It's a term coined by Carl Jung, and it refers to those aspects of ourselves that we don't want to face.
The parts we keep hidden, even from ourselves. Our dark side, so to speak.
And Jung believed that true healing requires acknowledging and integrating this shadow. It's about facing our demons, so to speak.
But why is that so hard? Why do we resist facing our shadow?
Because it's often filled with things we don't like about ourselves, things we judge and condemn in others.
So we project our shadow onto the world, seeing our own darkness in other people.
It's easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror.
But facing our shadow is actually liberating, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about bringing those hidden parts into the light of awareness, where they lose their power.
And Hawkins says humor can be a great tool for this. It helps us to see the absurdity of our fears, to not take ourselves so seriously.
It's like deflating a balloon. Once you poke a hole in it, all the air rushes out, and it's just a flimsy piece of rubber.
And when we face our shadow, we're less drawn to external portrayals of violence and darkness.
We've already confronted it within ourselves, so we don't need to seek it out in the world.
But facing our shadow also means facing the fear of others' opinions. It's hard to be authentic when you're constantly worried about what others will think.
And Jung believed that we all share a collective unconscious, a reservoir of universal human experiences.
So those shadow qualities we're so afraid of, they're not unique to us. Everyone has them.
We all fear being seen as dumb, ugly, unlovable, a failure. It's part of the human condition.
And our unconscious mind isn't exactly known for being polite or politically correct.
It's raw, unfiltered, driven by primal impulses, like road rage. You're driving along, feeling calm and collected, and then someone cuts you off and boom.
You're suddenly filled with rage, wanting to chase them down and give them a piece of your mind.
But experiencing those impulses doesn't make you a bad person. It's about understanding how the mind works, how our animal nature can sometimes hijack our better judgment.
And suppressing all of that takes a lot of energy, doesn't it? It's exhausting to constantly be on guard, to keep our shadow hidden.
It drains us, leaving us depleted and unable to fully experience and express love.
And remember, like attracts like. Fear attracts more fear, while love attracts more love.
So the more fear we hold on to, the more fearful our reality becomes. And fear has a huge impact on our health, our relationships, our happiness.
It weakens our immune system, affects our energy levels, makes us withdraw from others, keeps us from living fully.
And Hawkins challenges the idea that fear keeps us safe. He argues that it actually blinds us to real dangers, making us more vulnerable.
It's like wearing blinders. You might feel safe, but you're actually missing what's going on around you.
And he suggests that we can take protective actions from a place of love, not fear. Caring for our health because we value our bodies, being kind because we respect others, doing good work because we care about quality.
It's a different motivation, a different energy, and it leads to a different outcome.
When speaking of fear, we need to talk about guilt. It's another big one, and it often goes hand in hand with fear.
Guilt, that feeling of wrongness, like you've done something bad and deserve to be punished.
And Hawkins says that if that external punishment doesn't come, we often punish ourselves. We sabotage our own success, create problems for ourselves, even make ourselves sick.
And it's crazy how guilt can weaken us physically. Just thinking a guilty thought can drain your energy and make you feel weak.
And he questions why we praise guilt so much. Why do we talk about appropriate guilt as if it's a good thing?
It's often seen as a necessary part of moral development, a way to keep us in line.
But Hawkins argues that most guilt is completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with reality. It's self-condemnation, pure and simple.
It's that constant voice in our head saying, you should be doing this, or you're not good enough.
And we try to escape guilt through all sorts of strategies. We suppress it, deny it, project it onto others, distract ourselves with anything we can find.
But it always comes back to bite us, doesn't it? Repressed guilt manifests in all sorts of unhealthy ways.
And Hawkins contrasts guilt with love. Guilt is death, he says, while love is life. Guilt shuts us down. Love opens us up.
Guilt makes us believe we're unworthy. Love reminds us of our inherent goodness.
And he asks a really poignant question. Why do we buy into so much negativity and guilt?
Why are we so quick to condemn ourselves?
He suggests it might be because of our own innocence. We're trusting, we believe what we're told, especially as children.
And we internalize those negative messages even if they're not true.
And that guilt can actually stem from our innocence. It's like our pure selves recognizing the dissonance between the negativity we've absorbed and our true nature.
So how do we break free from this?
By becoming more conscious, by paying attention to the messages we're receiving, questioning them, and choosing to believe something different.
It's about waking up and realizing that we don't have to buy into the negativity. We can choose love instead.
And Hawkins says that this process can sometimes lead to anger. But anger can be a powerful motivator. It can fuel our desire to change, to break free from the things that are holding us back.
And it's not about becoming an angry person, but about channeling that anger into positive action.
And he assures us that this journey of self-discovery, while it might sound daunting, actually leads to lightness, freedom, and a deeper connection with love.
We shed the negativity, the baggage, the limiting beliefs, and we become more aligned with our true selves.
And he reminds us that if our core was truly bad or evil, great spiritual teachers wouldn't advise us to look within.
They wouldn't tell us to go on this inner journey if it was going to lead us to darkness.
And he suggests that what we perceive as evil is often just ignorance, a lack of understanding. It's not something to be feared, but something to be illuminated with love and compassion.
And the rewards of letting go of guilt are immense. Our health improves, our relationships blossom, our energy soars. We become more loving, more compassionate, more alive.
And he gives some very practical advice. Be wary of guilt mongers, those who try to control you through fear and guilt.
Don't buy into their agenda. Question their motives. Choose love instead.
And he challenges the idea that guilt is necessary for ethical behavior. He says that consideration for others is a far more effective motivator.
It's about doing the right thing because it feels good, because it's in alignment with our values, not because we're afraid of punishment.
And he draws a parallel between the guilt programming we experience today and the overt cruelty of the Middle Ages.
It might be more subtle now, but it's still there, lurking beneath the surface of our society.
And he ends with a powerful analogy.
Mm.
The pail of crabs. You know how if you put a bunch of crabs in a pail and one tries to climb out, the others will pull it back down?
Yeah, it's a classic example of crab mentality.
And Hawkins says that the world is often like that. As we try to rise above the negativity, to break free from fear and guilt, there will always be those who try to pull us back down.
They'll criticize us, judge us, try to make us feel small.
But by becoming aware of this dynamic, we can choose to resist it. We can choose to keep climbing, to reach for the light.
So deep divers, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of fear, what's the main takeaway?
That fear is a powerful force, but it doesn't have to control us. By understanding its mechanisms, by facing our shadow, by choosing love over guilt, we can break free.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs. But with awareness and persistence, we can all move towards a more fearless and joyful existence.
And here's a little something to ponder as you go about your day. Think about one specific fear that resonated with you today. How might shifting your perspective from fear to love, or acknowledging the shadow aspects connected to that fear, begin to change its hold on you? Explore that, deep divers. That's your homework.
And until next time, keep diving deep and keep letting go.
See you on the other side of fear.